I got to address a vile conspiracy theory that has burped its way out of the dark, festering, pustule-filled bowels of the internet. I was horrified to see that I was being accused of being sponsored by Zen.
What is it with all of these comedian podcasters talking about Zen?
They getting paid, dog.
Zen isn't paying comedians to shill their hyper-addictive, awesome fucking product. If they were, then I'd probably have some Zen pouches sent to my house. Instead, guess what I'm doing? Renegade Rogue!
Renegade Rogue, Renegade Rogue, and you want a teabag in your mouth while you're headed down the road, beautiful and bold, that's Renegade Rogue.
What's funny about what just happened is my camera just turned off on me. This is the kind of shit I'm contending with. It just turned off. Why did it turn off? It turned off because I live in Austin and the air conditioner in my studio broke. And so just so you get an understanding of the boiling cauldron I'm broadcasting from, now you know. Regardless, YouTube people, I love you. I'm so glad you guys like the video version of the DTFH. I'm still figuring it out, as you could see, which is why the video quality probably sucks and the angle's different. And now, if you could see this on YouTube, guys, if you weren't just doing audio, you would be able to see my studio. And not to brag, but right back there is a broom. You would see a green broom. See that, gang? That's a green fucking broom, because I sweep my studio sometimes. This, if you're wondering what this is, I don't know where it came from. It just showed up in my studio one day, but this is what I use to turn my air conditioner on. Just so you understand where I'm at technologically. I don't have a remote control air conditioner. My air conditioner is fucking loud, and the reason it's messing up is because I changed the filter. Now, to put it in perspective, I've lived in this house for a little over a year, and I have never changed the filter on the air conditioner in that year. And I'm pretty sure the people who used to live here didn't change the filter. So crusted onto the filter was just this thick, black, resinous goop, like just years of burps and farts and exhalations and like the dogs shitting in my studio. I mean, I can name all the things it absorbed. Like I've pissed in bottles, like, you know, the waft of old bottle piss, which is not a great smell. All of it just sucked in to this almost living surface, like a fungal in nature. It could have been mold. It could have been black. I don't know what it was. It was disgusting. I took it outside, and it took a long time to hose it off. The area where I hosed it off, this is where it gets really fucking weird. It grew all of these very strange pulsating mushrooms that glow in the dark, and at night they moan. It's a moaning sound. I didn't even know mushrooms could make sounds, but that should give you an idea of how absolutely toxic my AC was. It's also a great way to jump in to the subject of today's podcast, which is Confidence, written by David from the Midnight Gospel, David Nichtern's kid, Ethan Nichtern. He's written many books. He's been on my podcast a few times. He wrote The Road Home, The Dharma of the Princess Bride, and now, most recently, Confidence, Holding Your Seat Through Life's 8 Worldly Winds. Now, you know something I'm becoming increasingly aware of? I don't think it's all of you, but I think some of you are immediately turned off by Buddhism. And I know this because I have people in my life who just don't like it. They don't want to hear it. I think I heard Jack Kornfield say in Buddhism, God is lists. There's a lot of lists in Buddhism. It can get very technical. It can be very dry. And unless you're like really interested in it, it can seem like completely inaccessible and dull. Now, not to say that this book is dull. This is the Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism, its fundamentals and history. And just to give you an example of why I think some people are turned off by Buddhism, I'm just going to open up to a random part of the book. According to such passages, the arrangement of only 3 vehicles is not exclusively observed. Vajrayana, in this tradition of ours, there is a precise enumeration of 4, namely the vehicles of the pious attendant, self-centered Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and mantras, the last of which is classified into the 3 lower classes of Tantra and the 3 aspects of creation and perfection belonging to the unsurpassed Tantra, Blana Medpa Rugyud. Therefore, there is no room for contradiction in this orderly succession of the vehicle. Now, I think if someone was interested in Buddhism and made the tremendous mistake of choosing this as their first Buddhist text, they might read that and be like, this isn't for me. So if you're one of those people and you've been burnt by getting some super fucking advanced technical Buddhist text, I want to invite you to start over with Confidence, because Ethan's got this really wonderful, buttery writing style that is incredibly accessible, and which I think is one of his talents, aside from writing, is that he knows how to, he's a Buddhist scholar. Listen to the last episode. He knows so much about Buddhism, and so then to take all of that technical, dry, ethereal, enigmatic, mystical stuff and convert it into something accessible for the rest of us is like a true talent. It's like something that Ram Dass was very good at. So I hope you'll check this book out, because even if you are the most confident person on the planet right now, and you're like, I don't need to read about that, I'm so freaking confident. What's also cool about this book is that mixed into it is a great just general Buddhist teaching about meditation, practice, emptiness. So even if maybe confidence isn't exactly what you are interested in exploring, it certainly appeals to me. I think you'll still love the book, because it's filled with like a lot of like really intimate moments in Ethan's life, and a lot of just really simple but very profound Buddhist teachings that the point is, it's not all about confidence. It's not like this is like the 15 laws of power or some shit. It's like a wonderful addition to the Buddhist library of texts that I love. So I hope you'll check it out. But if you're like the rest of us, and you're not an alien, then and you deal with insecurity all the time, you deal with lack of, I certainly deal with it all the time. Just a habitual way of looking at everything I do with a very critical eye. And this is incredibly destabilizing if you're trying to do anything. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're trying to cook, if you're trying to have sex, if you're trying to do drugs, whatever the thing is that you're into. I don't know why those are the 3 things I picked. Perform. If you're trying to perform, if you're trying to rob a bank, whatever your thing is, like if insecurity creeps in, it's gonna mess up your performance. You're gonna make a bad meal. You're gonna get busted. You're gonna come too soon. You're not gonna make your partner come, because you're like, I'm just going to sleep. I suck. I'm a monster. So for me, a book that like connects Buddhism with confidence is like a dream come true. And it's a very practical book. Okay, I'm not going to keep tooting the confidence horn here. Either you're going to get the book or you're not. I mean, if you don't get the book, I feel bad for you. I feel like something really bad will happen to you if you don't get the book. I hope you get it. But if you don't get it, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Ethan, welcome back to the DTFH. How you doing? You just did a class?
Yeah, I just led a little mini online retreat, and yeah, it's great. Duncan, it's great to be back with you. Thanks for having me back.
Anytime. Anytime. And this is this episode. We have to talk about your new book, not just because I want to help you plug the book, but also because it's so good. It's so good. Like when you're people, when your friends write a book, there's a little feeling of like, God, Jesus, let it be good. Please let it be good. You want it to be good, because if it's not good, what are you going to say? What are you going to say?
And then they ask you to like share the word about it, and you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable.
And you're like, yeah, what's more important here? My friendship or some sense of like ethics, and those two clash, and then you just don't text them back ever again. You never talk to them again because you're a coward and you don't want to deal with the problem. Which is one of the things you recommend in your book, confidence. Stop texting people back if it feels uncomfortable. That'd be amazing if that was in this book. Just the essence of, as I understand this book, is if you feel insecure in a relationship, uncertain, cut that person off forever rather than directly deal with the issue. Am I reading it correctly?
Well, this is my book, Confidence. My next book is going to be called Mindful Ghosting.
I want to thank VB Health for supporting this episode of the DTFH. Hold on. I want to thank VB Health for supporting the podcast. It's a brand new sponsor. And I also want to thank them for sending me the coolest, weirdest sample pack of what they create that the fun thing about what I do is people send me the stuff that I pitch to you on the show. Sometimes, it's just in a box, whatever. I have no expectations, but sometimes it's not in a box. Sometimes it's in a fucking treasure chest. Come on, sponsors. I want more of these. I want more chests. And it's not just a treasure chest that came to the house late at night and completely terrified my wife, because 100% it seems like something a stalker might send, but it also came with a talking card that sounded like Saw.
Hello, Duncan. It's me, your AI prayer bot. Please close your eyes and pray with me. Hair Rama, Rama load boost.
They mixed the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in with the name of the product, which, as you may have heard, I don't know if you could have made it out, is called Load Boost. These people are like, I'm falling in love with them. Behold, look at that. It's a treasure chest full of foam sperm, which, who doesn't want so many foam sperm that laying about their house that says Load Boost on it? The poodle loves to fetch it. The problem is I can't really leave these laying around the house because I have kids, and it's going to be hard to explain to them, well, there's like the reason I have all the Load Boost sperm all over the place is it's a sponsor for an incredible product, if you're me, that makes you come more, makes you have more jizz. Am I allowed to say that? Load Boost. Yeah, it contains, I'm going to read it to you here. It contains Load Boost. It contains pygium, zinc, lecithin, and more. And there's a good reason why. Load Boost contains a blend of pygium, zinc, Load Boost contains a mix of pygium, lecithin, Load Boost. It contains Pythian, Load Boost. It's got pygium, lecithin, zinc in it, and adult film stars take this stuff so they can blast more. I don't mean to be vulgar. I'm sorry if this offends you, but I got to tell you, I'm excited to find out if this stuff works, and we're going to start my Load Boost journey right now. Also, this stuff, apparently, it makes your jizz taste better. Now, I'm interested in that because right now I hate the way my jizz tastes. So if this improves that, it is going to be a huge life improvement for me. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to take it, and then later, if you're on YouTube, I'll record the product. I'll record what happens. I probably can't do that, but I could at least describe it. I don't even know if I could do that on YouTube. But here we go. Down the hatch, friends, with a load boost. Wonderful. How many of these are you supposed to take? Did I just take pills sent to me in a chest with a card that sounds like the person from Saw? It's part of the job. This is what I do for you, my listeners. Load boost.
This is my book, Confidence. My next book is going to be called Mindful Ghosting.
You'll be a
No, I'm
billionaire.
kidding.
Just spiritualized ghosting. You'll be a billionaire. This is I want to know before I do any commentary on it. Why did you pick this as the topic for your next book?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm not going to write a book on ghosting. I don't recommend that, although we all have done it. Yeah, so this is my fourth book that I've written about, Buddhism in modern life. And, one time I got from a literary agent who wasn't my literary agent, but they basically said when you're a spiritual writer, one way to do it is you find your niche and then you kind of write the same book every time.
Yeah.
And in just slightly different ways. And I never wanted to do that. I kind of, wanted to always wait till I had something that I actually wanted to talk about or felt relevant and felt different enough from what I had talked about before. So confidence, it's a big part, I think, of Buddhist teachings when you dig in there. It's not obviously part of the Buddhist teachings, but I work with a lot of people in group environments and privately, and whenever we dig one level deeper in the conversation, just below kind of the initial attraction to mindfulness or meditation or Buddhist principles, we end up talking about like how to show up to life and how to trust that you can show up to life. And it almost always turns into some version of a conversation on how we struggle with confidence. So I wanted to kind of dig in to my own experience, dig into the places in classic Buddhist thought and modern psychology and things like that where a conversation about the struggle with confidence or the practice of confidence could come from. So, it's something I've struggled with.
Yeah.
I think it's something everybody struggles with. I think some people pretend not to struggle with it, but I think they're probably lying and, or at least lying to themselves, or
Right.
They should have written the book. If they're not. And yeah, so that's how it came about. And, I know it's a good topic because usually when I talk, like I meet somebody for coffee or I meet a friend of a friend and they're like, oh, Ethan, he teaches Buddhism and he writes about Buddhism. And they ask, what's your book about? I usually have to explain it for a little while before they're like, oh yeah, I get that. That's interesting. This one, I literally just have to say the title and people are like, I need to read that.
Yeah. Well, how do you define confidence?
Yeah, I mean, if you look in the dictionary, the definition that you find most often is trust or firm trust, right?
Firm trust.
So trusting oneself, I think, would be, self-confidence. And I think more than that, trusting that we can show up to the present moment and figure out how to be, fucking up, making mistakes, being in a constant learning process, but trusting I can actually be here and I can figure out how to be here and it's going to be okay fundamentally. And I can maybe pursue the things I want to pursue in life with making a lot of mistakes, but I can actually ride the energy of not knowing how it's going to go and trust myself through the process and do hard things. I guess to me, I've always thought of the opposite
of confidence is insecurity. Would you agree? Insecurity?
Yeah, and I think another word that comes up in modern parlance, fragility, but I like the word insecurity.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to think about the fragility one a little bit. But insecurity, that's a word I'm very familiar with. In fact, that should be the topic of that should be my book. I'm an expert at feelings of insecurity. I think a lot of people I know are plagued by a general sense of the world being a very dangerous place, not just dangerous for the obvious reasons that we all know about, but dangerous in the sense that they can't trust people. Forget trusting yourself. They can't trust people. When they do trust people, they often are betrayed, which makes them not trust their instincts about other people. And then a general sort of muddy feeling regarding one's role in life. They call it imposter syndrome. You hear it all the time. Regardless of external success factors, some inner insecurity regarding their profession, or they, instead of saying I got this because of hard work, they will say, I got this because of good luck. I don't know, or I don't know why this happened to me.
Or connections.
Yeah, or connections.
My connections.
Or my parents, or whatever it is. But very rarely do you hear someone confidently say how they achieved whatever they achieved. And when you do hear it, it's actually a breath of fresh air. It's really nice when you hear that. But usually what I hear are varying degrees of expressions of insecurity regarding one's place in the universe. And the idea of living confidently in the world, like you write about in your book, it sounds like a dream or something. I think for a lot of us neurotics, that sounds like the Garden of Eden or heaven.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, the same way we could idealize a spiritual concept like enlightenment or awakening, we could idealize confidence, right? So I'm not that interested, or I haven't yet discovered how to completely be at ease with who I am in the world, how I'm regarded. So I view it more as a practice. That's one of the things I say in the introduction and the conclusion. Confidence is not an endpoint, it's a practice, and I think when we look at it that way, we don't have to be secure all the time. It's just saying, when I'm feeling insecure, how can I actually work with that? How can I train? How can I open my heart? How can I show up anyway and maybe learn something through not feeling so settled, and maybe through that process slowly develop more ease and more familiarity with the things that knock me around or the things that make me feel insecure.
Okay, so in your book, you describe confidence as your seat, and there's the worldly winds that blow us. That once you get attached to these things or to one or the other, this knocks you off your ass. Basically, you don't say that, but essentially, you describe the things
I
that
should
tend
have.
to not.
Yeah.
You can in a book. You can in a book like this. So it is literally seat is a nice way to say ass, but it doesn't matter. I don't want to get lost in semantics here. Tell me about the winds. What are these winds?
So first of all, to just build out the metaphor, so there's when we're talking about arriving in your meditation posture in meditation, in the traditions that I learned, the first step is always called, and I know David, my father, talks about this, and this is the way his teacher talked about it, taking your seat, right? And taking your seat has a real practical aspect, which is just arranging your posture in a way that you're grounded, but you're not going to sleep. You're also uplifted. So we sometimes say upright, but not uptight, right? So there's an arriving, But there's also kind of a metaphor for meditation being the way we approach showing up to the present moment in every part of our life. Our meditation is kind of like a flight simulator for the rest of life that way. And in that way of looking at things, taking your seat is like claiming your spot on the earth and saying, I'm here. I can be here. I belong here. You know, like,
Yeah.
And that's not always what people think of when they think of meditation. They often think of like transcending the mundane, transcending the earth. But this is really saying that
Right.
the beginning of meditation practice is when you decide, I'm going to be here, you know?
Right.
So that's taking your seat. And then there's this notion that once we take our seat in meditation, it's mostly mental events. But in life, it's all of these different forces that come along. And they're really forces based on what we hope for in life, especially when we try to show up and achieve something.
Yeah.
And what we're afraid of in life when we try to show up and be somebody in the world and achieve something.
Yeah.
And so these forces of hope and fear can be thought of as winds. And there's a classic Buddhist teaching that's actually one of my favorite of all the many, many lists in Buddhism that I think doesn't get talked about enough. So I spent the first 60% of this book talking about it, called the 8 worldly winds, right?
Yeah.
And the 8 worldly winds are these 4 pairs or 4 couples. In each couple, there's a feared experience when we try to show up to the present moment,
Yeah.
and there's a hoped for or desired experience when we
Okay.
try up. So the most visceral one is just the simplest, the most human is pleasure and pain.
Yep.
Right? We show up to the moment. I hope it feels good. It's going to suck if it hurt, you know?
Right.
And I got a root canal on Thursday, so my first ever root canal, so I know the experience of
I got to get a
oh, is
colonoscopy,
this-
and that's exactly how I feel about it.
I'm supposed to, too. I turned 45 this year, and I'm like, nah, I'm
late.
waiting a year.
I'm
And all my
late,
friends
but
are
I
like,
hope
you
it
can't
feels
wait. But I'm like, I'm Are you afraid it's going to
Your
hurt?
friends say your friends say you can't wait. They don't say I can't wait.
Oh, they haven't mentioned Duncan Trussell.
No, I'm saying no one when they have no one's like I can't wait for my colonoscopy. Like there's never in the history. I'm sure there's people who've actually said that. I'm sure there's
Right.
people who get them every week, but that's not the point. I get it. Like you there's some future event. Your mind simulates the very worst thing that could happen at that event in a very real way. And I mean, if you're me, and then what you do as in the moments approaching that event is you feel horrible all the way up till the moment of the event. And then quite often, whatever you are afraid of, it's either not as bad as you thought it would be, or actually it turns out to be pleasurable. And you look back and realize, my God, I just spent 2 weeks or longer in a kind of low-level anxiety over nothing. And, or, disappointment, I guess, is the opposite, where you're like, this is going to be incredible. And then something goes wrong and you are now disappointed. You're like, God, that was horrible. What's wrong with me?
Yeah. Or it is incredible and then it ends.
Oh God, yeah, that one sends a lot of people to the mental hospital, man. They can't handle that. That's a real dark one.
Yeah. And it's even worse when a meditation session is incredible, but then it ends and you can't get back there, right? What
Yep.
do you do with that?
Yeah.
So pleasure and pain are the kind of most visceral pair. Then praise and criticism, which is the beginning of, how we receive feedback about how we're
Yep.
doing in the world. And then sort of our larger sense of being known in the world, what's traditionally called fame and insignificance. But in the book, I talked a lot about influence versus insignificance.
Great.
And then the most general one, just about our identity, about pursuing anything in the human path, success and failure. Sometimes
Right.
that one is called gain and loss, but I like to view it as we set out to do a project and we hope it succeeds and we fear it fails.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So these wins, they blow together. I mean, like, it's not like you just get one win. Like, generally, all of the wins are going to appear in any given endeavor. The wins. And what I really love, and I didn't finish your book. It came a few days ago. And actually, let me just say this. your writing is so good, man. I am jealous of you are such a skillful writer. And I think it's really easy to understand this stuff and then write about it in a very dry, non-compelling way that people can't really relate to. So, I do like books like that, like in the sense you have to really you have to really sort of break your brain trying to understand it. But I prefer Ram Dass style books where you, in the midst of describing these things, are so honest about your own life and parenting in general. And talk.
Yeah, we could talk about that one.
Oh my God. Talk about like a thing that, if confidence is a practice, then parenting, truly you have to practice confidence all the time. And I like how you mentioned in this book, you talk about, moments where you say something to your child, and then the first thing that pops into your head is like, well, that's therapy.
That's their entire 20s of therapy, right?
And you want to we've created email accounts for our kids so we can send them messages as they grow up and they can go back and look at it if they want to. And you almost want to send an email like for their therapist. Like, you can just share this with your therapist. This is what I did. I shouldn't have. I don't know. You're 5, so I don't know how to explain to you about the snowball, the boulder of trauma and horror that rolls down generationally and occasionally like comes out of anyone. And I just gave you a little taste of that. Regardless, these wins, as a parent, my God, they kick up all the time because it's such a tumultuous, chaotic sometimes experience. And no, you can't train someone to be a parent, I don't think.
Yeah. And hope and fear are arising constantly, right?
Yes.
I've had multiple days where I was on the same day called the best dad in the world and a bad dad, So what do you do with that? How do you
do you do with that?
Talk about hope and fear.
Or talk about praise and blame. Because once you become a dad, all you want to do is be a great dad. And when someone critiques your parenting, a partner, the kid, whoever, you just read some like fucking TikTok where somebody's like up at 4 a.m. making their kids like some insane buffet style beautiful breakfast. And you're just like, whoa, what the fuck am I doing, man? What the fuck am I doing? I need to sleep. Praise and blame hit hard. And there's so much to talk about in your book. But I really would like to focus on praise and blame. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
This thought occurred to me reading praise and blame. I was thinking like pre-internet, how many times would an average person get criticized per day? Right. And I think that number is substantially, infinitely lower than it is now if you have some kind of online life. Like any given human hanging out on the internet, which is our new town square or whatever you want to call it, is experiencing a shotgun blast of praise and blame with any given post, no matter what it may be. And this, I think, is causing some low-level psychosis in our culture because this is not supposed to happen to people unless you're a comedian, and then it's even worse, which is, for me, the way I connect to this personally is, as a comedian, if I go on stage wanting to do good, laughter being praise, as a comedian, then now I'm vampirizing the audience. I'm not going out there to give, I'm going out there to take. But if I go on stage scared that they're not going to like me, then that is another form of a kind of vampirism. But even worse, they can sense it as an audience. They can feel your lack of confidence. And so I really want to focus on these two, on this wind and its opposite. And hear your thoughts on mitigating it, finding balance within it, and your own personal experience with dealing with praise and blame.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's different words we could use. I think for now, like talking about blame, maybe also talking about criticism, I think
Sure.
might be, and so, this is the second pairing. And in the book, the first of these 4 pairings are 8 wins, pleasure and pain. I think it's important. So the main insight is we're actually not going to escape these wins, right?
Okay.
So the idea that you're going to attain some spiritual reality where these things don't happen to you anymore and they don't affect you is a dream world. It's kind of like some transcendent fantasy. Now, definitely they might not affect us and cause us to suffer quite the same way, and maybe eventually they won't cause us to suffer at all, but I think it's important to look at criticism the same way we look at a painful physical sensation and to some degree. And so one of the insights, given that both are the feared, in the couple or the feared element, is something that, different modern psychologists and evolutionary biologists have talked about. And Rick Hansen, who wrote a really lovely endorsement for the book, who wrote one of my favorite books called Buddha's Brain, talks about in that book is a phrase you may have heard of before, the negativity bias.
Yes.
And the negativity bias is basically our evolutionary response where we are way more likely to become conscious of negative information than we are of positive information, for the basic reason that our system is geared towards survival.
Yes.
Right? So what that means is that we're looking much more closely at things that might threaten our survival.
Right.
Now, we could say, okay, criticism, that's not a threat to my survival. If somebody dunks on your stand-up set, if somebody leaves me a 1-star review for this book on Goodreads, like my body is still safe. Nobody actually touched us, right? But we also have a social self, right? We have a relational self. And we don't just have a physical body. We have an identity that's built in relationship to other people, right? And so the critic is so important because there's a pain to our identity in relationship to others, right? That we have to learn to hold our seat with or work with. And it's not quite as primal as physical pain, but it is fairly primal, The other aspect of this, I think, when we meditate, when we do therapy or something like that, we're primarily working with inner criticism. I think that's really important, is to get more aware of our inner critic.
Yes.
And I think it's actually really helpful, and I do this in the introduction and later in the book, to kind of give our inner critic some names,
Yes.
So like the voice that's hovering over how you're doing as a father, like that could have a name,
Okay, that's good.
Sharon Salzberg, my friend and teacher, talks about naming her inner critic Lucy from Peanuts, because she always saw this. She teaches about this a lot, but she always saw this Peanut comics strip where Lucy, who was a real jerk to Charlie Brown, said to him at one point, "The thing about you, Charlie Brown, or the problem with you, Charlie Brown, is that you're you." And he goes, well, I don't know what I can do about that, So Sharon, whenever she had a very critical thought come up, inner critic thought, she called that voice Lucy.
Also,
she just
Lucifer
said, "Hey, Lucy,"
is not a bad name.
Kind of welcomed it a little
This
bit.
is why
At least. Lucifer.
I like the
Right, exactly.
Satan. To me, I think as an all-encompassing name for that voice, I'll go straight to Satan. Like, get thee behind me, and box it all up. Satan, the accuser. Yes. So, and I agree with you. Like, at least the criticism that one will gain from posting anything on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever, is weirdly consensual, right? Like, you have to read the comments to get the criticism. You don't have to read the comments. But the inner critic, The inner critic, it's not consensual. It's just whatever name you want to give it. It's just something inside of you bellowing or hissing out what you're doing wrong at any given moment. And yes, I agree with you. If we're going to address one of these, it should be that thing that dwells inside of us and just is constantly heckling.
Right. But this is the thing, right? So the inner critic and the outer critic, when you try to show up in the world, they're both talking to you, you know? And I think the first step is when you put something out there, you know, like let's say, because you're talking about our internet, let's say you put a post on social media.
Yeah.
You know, let's say I put out this book, you put out your podcast, or you send somebody an email. It doesn't have to be so big in public. It could just be more relational. You know, like you send somebody sends you a harsh text message, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, why are you dissing me? You're supposed to love me, you know? And, so I think the first thing is to realize there's a wind there. In other words, there's a force, there's an impact. It's actually going to strike us, and that's okay. Like, and we could pretend to be impenetrable, you know, or we could pretend like, you know, I reference, because in every book I write, I have to reference at least one Radiohead song. So I reference the Radiohead track off of Kid A, maybe their second best album behind OK Computer. Some people would say it's their best.
Kid A fucked me up, man. But that's a different
Kid A was
podcast.
so good. Yeah. We could do a Dharma of Radiohead podcast anytime. I will show up for that podcast. But how to disappear completely, right? And Tom York says again and again through this, almost like a mantra, I'm not here, this isn't happening, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we could do this all we want, but like, actually, I am here, and this is happening, and somebody's going to say something that hurts my feelings. And I could pretend it doesn't, but it has an impact, you know? The wind strikes, right? And I was afraid. You know, I put something out there with this book, let's say, that I wanted people to like, and I'm afraid somebody's not going to like it, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
I think first is acknowledging that. Just acknowledging that. Just being honest and kind enough to ourselves to acknowledge, I was hoping people liked me, and this person said a thing that now I'm like, I think I might be disliked. For this moment, at least, right?
Right.
That hurts.
Yeah, and it hurts even more when they're right. You know, like if you realize, you know, okay, at least if they're wrong, you're like, you're insane. That is, but when they're right, and it's a blind spot, you didn't even know it was there, and they found it, and then they identify it. Holy shit, that hurts. And but no matter what, even if they're wrong, and especially if it's someone you know personally, there's a sense of like you feel like someone is being like violent with you or aggressive or doesn't love you or doesn't care about you or secretly doesn't like you. Like these are all of the thoughts that pop up. And sometimes you talk about this in your book, like if these happen to you when you're a kid, it can shape your whole life.
Yep.
You know, like if it happens in the years where you don't remember, but you do somewhere in there, then it can really create a cycle in your life where you don't even realize that a long time ago, someone probably older, bigger, who made you with eggs and cum says a thing to you. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe and especially, I think mixed in with this praise and blame is a generalized lack of understanding of the process of getting better at stuff. Like, God help you if you had parents who didn't understand that you have to fail to get good at something. If you had parents who wanted you to succeed from day one, and people have parents like that, and so we're constantly beating you down because, I'm gonna suck at what singing, writing, drawing, sports, whatever it may be, because I just started. But, you know, if someone emphasizes that enough to you as a kid, then you will have the inner critic suddenly just start saying, like, don't even try that. You're terrible at sports. You have no dexterity. You can't catch anything. We don't do sports. Trussels don't do sports. You're not an athlete. Whatever. And you think that's coming from you spontaneously. You don't know you've been poisoned by someone who didn't understand progress.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of, you said pre-internet, and I think that's really important because, if we're talking about how to give and receive feedback, that's something in the teachings on right speech that Buddhism and, a lot of different traditions talk a lot about. I'm thinking of nonviolent communication. If we're talking about that, like when Buddhism's talking about like right speech, it's talking about like having a few human relationships, and it's coming from an era.
Look, I know that maybe the subject of this commercial might be a little off-putting to some people, but the reality of it is a lot of us have watched porn or watch porn. And when you see the glorious explosion of life blasting out of these porn stars, and you compare that to the sad drizzle that you've been creating, you want more. You want a load boost. I want to be Mount Vesuvius. If I could, I would. I would explode like an amount of jizz that would like destroy an Italian village. Just to know what that felt like. I'd feel horrible about it and probably instantly regret it, because you know how it is when you come, you like immediately are like, what was I thinking? But it's the kind of thing I would do if I were a god. I want you to join me in my load boost journey. Share with me the results of your experiments with load boost. Did it work? Did your jizz taste better? Is your sperm healthier? Most importantly, are you blasting huge, incredible explosions of spermatozoa wherever you blast typically? I want to know. Visit loadboost.com right now. Use offer code Duncan to get 10% off your loadboost.com. Use offer code Duncan to get 10% off this incredible supplement. Try it. That's Load Boost, LOADBOOST.com. Use offer code Duncan to get 10% off. And stay tuned. In further episodes, I will let you know if there has been a transformation in my cum. I'm sure that's something you want to know, and I want to know if this transforms your cum. So let me know. Share your Load Boost stories with me. Thank you, Load Boost.
Where they didn't even have the written word yet. So, like, the words you said to another person, it probably only happened a few times a day. And they were probably incredibly important, and you probably thought about them for a few hours before saying them. And that was a practice, right? And that was a practice amongst people who are all trying to practice mindfulness. So now you bring that into this arena where, we're trying to manage, even if you don't have a large following, but you have a social media profile, managing 500 relationships at once, and that's 500 people who could tell you suck at something and don't know you or do know you, or that's a lot to hold. That's a lot of wins. That's a lot of force to hold. Yeah. And we have no training in how to do that,
None, other than just either, I think the training, I guess, is, it's a training in ignorance. Like from the Buddhist perspective, like you learn to actively ignore, which I think flies in the face of what you're talking about in your book, which is that isn't the answer. Maybe the answer isn't to not read the comments. Maybe the answer is to read the comments, but find a way to not let those comments destabilize you permanently, throw you off your track to continue on regardless of some temporary assessment of wherever you're at in your process.
Yeah. Well, I think, everything is sort of, just like training physically, we have to know what we can take on at any given moment, so it might sometimes like being like, I can't stand reading the comments today. I think it's also really important to because we're talking about unsolicited feedback, so I think it's also really important when you're trying to show up, when you have a spiritual path or you're working on yourself in some way, when you're putting your work out there in the world. I think it's important to have people whose feedback you trust, right?
Right.
And it's important, as I'm thinking about this, I mentioned very confident hip hop artists have hype men, right? And
Yeah.
comedians also have this too, right? I think there's a difference between if you're headlining and you have somebody you trust to come out and warm up the crowd.
Right.
So that, once you take the stage, they're like, oh yeah, Duncan's here, right? But so there's some use to having people who actually tell you you're great,
Well,
I think in parenting.
Well, let me stop you there. The feature act's job definitely isn't to tell you you're great. It's just they need to be funny before you go on stage as the headliner. That's their job.
Right,
My
right.
God,
But they
I think that's a great idea, though. My God, replace the feature with someone who for 10 minutes just has to talk about how great you are. Then they bring you up.
But they bring you up, and they're not supposed to say, well, I was much better than the guy you all came here to
I got
see,
you.
right?
You're talking about when you bring the next person up. The person
Right.
you've been waiting for. I got you. Okay, you're right. That
And
is
they
a hype
warm
man.
up the crowd, right? So there's
Yeah.
a general environment of
Yes.
there's a general environment of support. That's
Absolutely.
the idea, right?
Gotcha,
That's the
gotcha.
idea of having the hype man, right? And
Yeah.
and we all need a little bit of that, and we need to know when we're doing some work in the world or we're working on ourselves, who can tell it to me straight, but also in a supportive way.
Right.
Who loves me. So I tell the story of my friend who's a Dharma teacher, writer, and entrepreneur, Susan Piver, who talked about, she works on projects, and she had this friend. I thought this was really insightful. So whenever she was working on a long-term project, she had this one friend who, if she asked him very early in the process, what do you think of this? He would point out all the potential obstacles, and his feedback was good, but what she needed at that phase was just go create,
Right.
be free, go try things,
Yes.
build. And so what she realized was not to not ask him what he thought, but to be a little bit more skillful and ask for his feedback later in the process when she needed edits,
Right.
when the project was far enough along to sort
Right.
of survive his razor a little
Right.
bit more. So I think kind of
That's
knowing
cool.
what we need, and
That's cool.
and we all need support, we do.
Yeah.
We do need people telling us we are basically good, we're doing great, I think the best feedback usually comes when somebody's like, you're doing awesome, you're really doing awesome. Here's one thing to look at. Just
Right.
focus on this one obstacle or this one thing that's not connecting or working.
And, don't make the assumption that everyone you're talking to or getting feedback from went to college, went to a writing class where the first thing they teach you is how to give feedback, right? In a good class, any good class, there's an instruction usually about here's what good feedback looks like, here's what shitty feedback looks like. And I love understanding that some people, they're going to God help you if you bring, some people are essentially abortion doctors for early embryonic ideas. And you need to know, you know what I mean? You bring the embryo to the abortion doctor, it's going to get aborted. They will not understand the way your process works, and then maybe this thing is going to grow into something wonderful. They're just going to look at it and be like, you got to kill it, kill it now. It's so I love that understanding. Yes, that's that kind of person. And then you're so lucky if you have the other kind of person in your life, who I don't know if a lot of people even have that. Who's just yeah, great. Maybe try this. So that's a wonderful thing. And also maybe learning how to give criticism yourself, having the ability to understand where a project is and what kind of criticism is going to benefit the person who's bringing it to you the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also there's there's a contemplative slogan in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition from this set of, I don't know if you're familiar with it, 59 contemplative slogans about basically how to be a bodhisattva, compassionate being, and wake up. It's called the Lojong, or mind training slogans. And this slogan goes, of the two witnesses, observe the principal witness. And basically what this is saying is you do always have what other people think, and you have what you think, you know? And I do think it's really important that when we receive feedback from others, to listen, you know, as you were saying, like maybe do read the comments, you know, because I think as we gain confidence, we actually can, like, you can read if somebody's just kind of a little nutty, you know, or in a rough place themselves, and it's not really about you, or if like they maybe saw something that's actually useful.
Yeah.
And you can especially read that if you have a trusted, you know, if you have a mentor in a certain area. Like, I don't know, you know, if you, for your comedy work, like if you are working with mentors that you run stuff by. We have that dharmically, we have that therapeutically. You know, I have my literage, and I have my, you know, 2 editors, you know, for this book. So there's a sense of like running this by people who you trust in the process. But, you know, yeah, of
Let me
course.
mark this. Hold on. We had one little something just happened. I don't know why. Hang on one second. My camera just switched for no reason. I don't understand why. Hold on. This has never happened before. Forgive me. Are we still rolling? Okay. Hold on. Let me mark this. I know where it is. And then figure out what happened. Just one moment. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Where is it? So just take one second. Hold on, let me see something. I want to make sure my camera didn't just conk out on me or something. I think it did. Weird. It died on me. Okay, hold on. We're going to take a quick break. Actually, that was a perfect spot for a commercial break. I just got to go grab a battery out of my bag here. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we're
Oh,
good.
I did that. I want to thank Rocket Money for supporting this episode of the DTFH. If you're like me and you're somebody who doom scrolls late at night and then starts wondering about what new artificial intelligence apps exist, and then you find one that seems perfect for whatever weird thing you were trying to do, and then you subscribe to it, and then because it's late at night, you just forget that you subscribe to this app or that app or that app or another app, and the next thing you know, money is pouring out of you, like somebody who just has a gaping wound. I don't know if you've ever seen those horrible videos. Every once in a while, someone will get stabbed, and for whatever reason, they don't even know it. You see them walk around the grocery store, blood blasting out of their back. They're somehow unaware, and then they just fall down. They collapse. It's so sad and horrific. But this is exactly what unwanted subscriptions are doing to your life. And who wants to figure it out? What, are you going to hire a detective to go in and figure out all the apps that you have? You really want to like look and hope that you pick the right credit card that you use for it. You just don't know how many of these parasitic hell apps are just sucking you dry. Rocket Money will save you. Rocket Money is incredible. Not only will it give you a great overview of what your spending's like, how much it's a great finance app, it'll also find all of your subscriptions. And if you want, it will either get rid of that subscription for you or renegotiate a better price, which is incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone out there who is selling an app who is seriously contemplating doing a Boeing with the people who created Rocket Money. Like, this is crushing people who are depending on stoners, forgetting that they subscribe to these apps. Rocket Money has saved users over $500 million so far. That is incredible. Stop wasting your money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/Duncan. Cancel those vampiric subscriptions. Peel the leeches off of your internet body. Go to rocketmoney.com/Duncan. Thank you, Rocket Money. Video, man.
You have multiple angles on your camera?
Just one, but it just adds, this is what sucks about it, is it just adds this weird extra thing I'm just so not used to. Hold on one second. Like I went to a camera store, and it's like the attitude is the same as when you go to a record store. They're kind of like weirdly, confusingly snobby about the situation.
Yeah.
And they start using weird camera words and like, what are you saying? I had to tell them, man, it's like you're talking in a different language. Hold on one second, we're almost there. No, that's not it. God damn it. Hold on. There it is. Just SP streaming. Alright. Put this in. Okay. And then I just have to set this up again. God damn it. I'm so sorry. One
No, we're
day
good.
none of this will happen. It'll all just work. I know you probably have shit to do. I'm so sorry, man.
No, we're good. I'm good till like 6 o'clock my time, so.
Great. We'll just do an hour. 1 second. God, this is annoying. That's never happened to me before. That's a new thing for me to worry about.
Did the battery just go out and it switched
Yeah,
camera
but usually
angles?
it charges, because I have it plugged into my computer, so usually it charges off of the computer. So that doesn't happen. So I don't understand why it didn't charge. But I'll figure it out eventually. Oh, damn it. Son of a gun, I'm sorry, man. Now the camera's wobbly. I'm a failure. I'm a pure fucking failure. Horrible failure. How do I know how to do this?
You're a video podcast failure.
Oh, I am. Just these, like, it's like this whole new, like, now it's just
Hold your
turning
seat, Duncan. Hold your seat.
Ah! My seat is screaming. I'm so close. Okay, there we go. Stop turning. Just stay still. Okay, we'll do this.
Yep.
You know what? We'll just use the regular camera.
Okay.
Who cares? If it switches midstream, it's YouTube. You know? I'm not Ken Burns. Who do I fucking care? It's gonna switch midstream. Who fucking cares? Who cares? Let me just adjust my computer here. There we go. There we go. All right. Let me just at least make sure the audio's right and it didn't mess that up. Yes. Okay. Great. Sorry about that, my friend. Guys, I'm doing video, as you know. It just didn't work. My camera died on me. I don't understand. Speaking of death, I know we're kind of getting off track here, but I want to get to something a little deeper regarding confidence. And I want to talk about absurdity a little bit, or sort of there's like lack of confidence in one's skills, lack of confidence in one's safety. But at some point in the deconstruction of culture and reality itself, a new kind of insecurity springs up, which is a general sense that the entirety of everything is bullshit. Like the whole thing itself, complete bullshit. And that to have confidence in any regard is to delude oneself into believing this incredible movie that is ultimately pointless. So, which is like somewhere in here, the I think at least Gen X definition of cool emerges, right? The nihilist, like in the Breakfast Club. This is old people references, but in the Breakfast Club, you have that dude in the trench coat who's basically like the whole system itself's a fraud, man. The whole thing itself is a ridiculous game of make-believe that people are taking so seriously. And at this point, confidence would actually just be having confidence in presenting oneself to the world. But that just alone is a fraud, because whatever you think you are is just some constructed, like somewhat self-constructed amalgam of various experiences that have all just smushed together in your life. And, from that perspective, confidence becomes a delusion.
Yeah. I love the question of absurdity. I mean, this is so, what we've been talking about is more personal. The last time I was here, we did talk about the TSA and butt plugs. So
we'll get there.
This time you're on colonoscopies. So you definitely, there's a region of the body that you go towards, I've noticed. But anyway.
Everyone noticed. You should hang out with me sometime. You'll really notice.
Maybe I'd enjoy that. Who knows? But anyway, so we talked about relative and ultimate truth, right? And we've been talking about kind of the relative truth of my life in the world, which is super important. It's super important. But now when we get into the conversation of absurdity, we're talking about ultimate truth. We're talking about what Buddhism calls emptiness, right? That would be the relationship to absurdity. And emptiness sounds like a term for nihilism. I believe I'm tail end of Gen X, 1978. So Judd Nelson is in the trench coat, I believe, in the Breakfast.
Yeah, that's right, Judd Nelson. Yes.
Yeah. So don't you forget about me. But there's a quality of this is all a hologram, right? This is all a construct, and I noticed that we're living in very nihilistic times too. I noticed that a lot about our political debate right now, like the sort of fuck this, it's all bullshit. I noticed that quite a lot. And I think that's how we ended up with a reality TV president, as people are just like, fuck this construct. Let's go with the guy who knows how to make shit up. You know?
Yeah. Well,
And
I mean, I
get it.
Or I get it too, because it's sort of like, when you were like in high school at my age, you sounded edgy when you would say something like, the president is just a mascot. The president doesn't really do anything. The presidents, if they're just actors that are being puppeteered by like forces that you will never see. And you would say a thing like that and you would feel so edgy and smart. But then gradually that idea, I think, spread into the public consciousness to the point that it was just like, let's just fuck this whole thing up. Like, instead of having a president that pretends to be nice, but is killing countless fucking people and making decisions that directly like blow babies up, let's have a president who doesn't pretend to be fucking nice and doesn't pretend to be sane and is just a maniac, and see what happens, because at least then there's some honesty there, as opposed to like, you know what I mean? Like all the other presidents who like try to act like they're fucking Aslan or like some like messenger of peace, and they're just killing babies left and right. It's like, what happened? Let's just get to the point. And so and that, what you're talking about, my God, I watched the new documentary on Timothy McVeigh. It's an amazing analysis of exactly what you're talking about, and how that sense of nihilism when it comes to the United States leads to Oklahoma City, leads to bombings, leads to violence, leads to like, look, this whole thing's a scam, so let's blow the whole fucking thing up and start over. That is a scary way of thinking, but a lot of people right now feel like that.
I get it. Yeah. I mean, and then you end up with this kind of absurdity where, like, I totally get it. That guy, the guy who we're talking about, objectively lied over 30,000 times the 4 years he was in office, but he sounds authentic because he sounds authentic about how it's all bullshit anyway. And that gets us to like absurdity, right? This kind of burn it all down approach. And I do think when we touch, the Breakfast Club, we can bring that back to sort of that adolescent nihilism, because the Breakfast Club, you bring it back to this sort of like, my high school is a construct, the world they want me to live in after this is a construct.
Yeah.
Like, what is the point? It's all suffering. Everybody's holding on to these fantasies. It all ends in death anyway, right? And that is, I think, that sort of nihilistic approach is in a sense the first kind of adolescent touch of seeing the truth of emptiness, right?
Right.
Seeing the truth of emptiness. But it's kind of an amoral, not immoral, not like evil, but it's like an amoral approach to seeing the truth that everything on the relative level is a construct. I mean, you want to succeed as a comedian, right? The most famous comedian, it's a construct, It's like, what does that even mean? The most famous comedian, like, and we're sitting here arguing, like, somebody says a thing and you go and you laugh a little bit, like, what would it mean to be a best-selling Buddhist author? Like, who fucking cares?
And the real question is, in 100 years, who gives a fuck? Like,
Yeah,
think back
about
to all
any
the
of it.
most famous comedians 100 years ago. Think about all the, in general, 100 years ago, no one gives a shit about you. Like, it doesn't really matter. And even the people who did great things, you're just like, they're fun to talk about, like Tesla or Einstein or something like that. But in general, like this foggy, or people that you loved who've passed on.
Yeah.
I talk
go ahead. About that in the chapter of the book on influence and insignificance, that idea of whatever we achieve, whatever we're known for, we have to accustom ourselves to the idea that that's going, like, we will not be known someday, So if we aim our life just towards being known in the world, we will not be known. And, the few people who have been known for thousands of years are almost certainly misremembered,
Right.
So So like there is a sense of letting go of solidity, and the first direction that does take us into, especially when we see the suffering of the world, is the fuck it, burn it all down, rage against the machine, wear my trench coat, pump my fist in the air, kind of vibe. But there's another side to emptiness, which is a care for sentient beings. Right. And also a realization that it's not that nothing is happening, right? That's not what emptiness means. That's what nihilism means. But it actually means nothing solid is happening. And what is actually happening is a bunch of minds, a bunch of like almost film projectors, right?
Yeah.
Who are meeting each other and are sharing our film projections about who we believe ourselves to be, and then that's bouncing off of other people's film projectors, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the question of like, do I care about the sentient beings who are those film projectors? Because it's not nothing at that point. There is a level of reality to the whole thing, and then there's a real level of compassion. I talk about that in the second section of the book, why compassion is related to true confidence. And then there's almost this rebound from nihilism that happens. There's almost this return from ultimate truth into relative truth, where you're like, okay, we are stuck in this projection. Or, a lot of people talk about the Matrix when they talk about Buddhist movies. But you're like, yeah, the Matrix is constructed. That doesn't mean it's not real. Because as long as there are beings in the Matrix, and this is the way classic Buddhism puts it, those beings matter,
Right.
And so we have to figure out a way to work within the construct with each other. And then you don't arrive at this like burn it all down approach to your own life or your family's life or your community or society's life. You arrive at this let's actually transform the mutual projection if we can. Like, let's realize that it is a construct. So let's actually, like, when somebody starts talking about the absurdity, let's have a sense of humor about that.
Sure.
Like, you do want somebody with a good sense of humor, and I think we want leaders with a good sense of humor too, because they can. When you have a good sense of humor, you can touch in with emptiness and absurdity. But then there's also this sense of care for sentient beings.
Right. And now, this is my understanding of this compassion is that somehow this remembrance of emptiness or recognition of emptiness leads to a kind of spontaneous compassion, right? Like it's not, in other words, it's not a self-imposed moral code where you fake compassion, but something about this recognition of emptiness, and also the recognition that within this emptiness there's form, there's sentient beings. From a true recognition of these things, one would become more compassionate. It's not self-imposed, right? It's not like you can't fake it. You can't really fake it. I mean, you could be nicer, you could pretend to be a nice person or follow some rules of etiquette or something, or just have a general sense of not being reactive and so as not to hurt people. But at the deeper level, this thing just starts popping out of you naturally when you recognize emptiness.
Yeah. So I think, and I talk about, again, compassion and confidence. And I think one of the reasons we don't like talking about compassion is it sounds like a moral imperative, right? It sounds like somebody's saying, you should be nice, right?
Yes.
I think it's much better to look at compassion as a perceptual and personal experience rather than a should. It's like when I touch into that space, and particularly it's touching into a space where the construct of self and other softens a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And when you touch into that, not as a moral imperative, not as I should be nice, but as a what does it feel like to actually feel attuned to somebody?
Yeah.
What does it feel like to actually care about yourself or care about Duncan? And care about their well-being. And even if you feel like their whole life is a construct, which it is, still to care about their heart and their mind, then that's an experience that's actually very enlivening. And you also remember, why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. And I think that's related to confidence, because a lot of times when we're very insecure about what we're trying to achieve, we get very myopic, we get very shut down, we get very goal oriented, and we get very, very failure averse, as you talked about. And just to say like, oh, I'm doing this to make a connection with sentient beings, right?
Right.
Like, that's a very different way to be a comedian. Like, I want to dissolve the boundary between self and audience. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's what great comedians do, by the way.
Yeah.
And that is a great Buddhist act of compassion, right? So
yes. Yeah.
But it's not a should. It's not a like be nice because mom said so or big brother said so. It's like feel into what it's like to drop that concept of self and other, and it feels good.
Oh my God!
Open-hearted.
Especially if you've been professionally selfish, or if you've just been selfish for decades, and suddenly you have that experience. It's for me, those moments far exceed like DMT or any like big psychedelic experience, in the sense that you are seeing a completely different dimension, like a completely different way of being in the world that is, for a lot of us, very unfamiliar. But so maybe this insecurity underneath it all, is it happening because of of the classic imbalance between relative and absolute reality? And in other words, like to really be like a way you could be transcendentally confident would be to recognize the empty nature of reality without discounting the self that you are in the world around you. That maybe the reason so many people underneath it all are so insecure and so freaked out is they haven't confronted the emptiness. They haven't confronted their own death. They haven't confronted the basic reality that no matter what you make in the world will inevitably dissolve, erode, vanish in the dusts and winds of time. And how could you feel confident in the world if you hadn't addressed that?
Yeah, you definitely have to work on both levels. So I think it's really important to look into our own voices of hope and fear, and we've been talking about praise and criticism and how those work for us and where they come from, where we get hit, where we get knocked off our seat, so to speak. But emptiness or ultimate truth is the container for the whole experience, and it makes the context a lot bigger, right? It's the same way, like, if you're freaking out about what's happening on Earth, right? One great way to deal with that is to like watch like a Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody like, or watch an episode of Star Trek, to be as nerdy as I am, and just see the cosmos for a moment, right?
Right.
Like my little dilemma on Earth, or Earthling's little dilemma, is positioned in something much larger, right?
Right.
So positioning the self in emptiness, in like non-solidity, in what Pema Chodron and others call sky-like mind, right?
Yeah.
That gives us like, oh, maybe it's not as important, if this Instagram post lands with a lot of people,
Right. This episode of the DTFH has been sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever had the experience of having something that you needed to talk about, but you don't have anybody to talk about it with? You know that certain people, if you talk about it with, they're going to get offended. Other people, if you talk about it with, they're probably going to hold it against you. And so you end up shoving it down into your heart. You don't say anything. The dream would be if we can shove it deep enough down, like really deep down, and just forget about it, then it's gone. But the reality is that's just not how it works. Humans are a little bit like the boiler in The Shining. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. There's a boiler room in The Shining, and Jack Nicholson's character, has got to release the pressure of the boiler every once in a while, because if he doesn't, the boiler will explode. I don't mean to say that the human psyche is a machine. Obviously, it's a spiritual, soul-based, beautiful, incredible, vibrant, hyperdimensional, potentially multidimensional extrusion into time-space. But just to put it in a basic way, if you don't figure out a way to talk to somebody about whatever it is you've been stuffing, if you don't find a way to release pressure in the boiler existing in the Overlook Hotel of your consciousness, then you can explode. And maybe not like an actual explosion, like you're not going to spontaneously combust, but you're going to have a couple of vodka sodas and suddenly say some shit that is horrible for no reason. Or you're just going to have those moments where like, what was that? What just came out of me? And your friends are going to look at you like, what just happened to you? Who was that? And that was the dark, creepy monstrosity that you're desperately trying to hide in the sub-basement of your life. This is why therapy is fantastic. Not only are therapists trained to listen, they also meet with freaked out people all day long. Not everyone's freaked out. I'm not implying you have to be necessarily freaked out to go to therapy. My point is, the best thing that happens in therapy is when your therapist, after you have confessed to them whatever this thing may be, tells you, yeah, that happens to a lot of people. And suddenly you realize you're not alone. Whatever it is, whatever the thing is, whatever your experience may be, you're not alone. Lots of other people have felt, thought, or experienced a similar thing, and that alone is incredibly cathartic. I have had a lot of great experiences in therapy, and to be honest, I've had a few bad ones, which is why BetterHelp is fantastic. BetterHelp is an online service where they will match you with a therapist, and if you don't like that therapist, you can find a new one. Now, if you're going to someone's office, like, it can be incredibly awkward when 15 minutes in, you realize this is not the therapist for me. Could be the therapist for some people, not the therapist for me. And then you feel like, fuck, I drove all the way here, wasted all this time. BetterHelp makes it so easy. They understand it's important to find the right therapist for you. I don't know, it's obviously not dating, but it's a little bit like that in the sense that you really need to feel comfortable with the person that you are talking to. And because if you don't, you're not going to be able to release the Kraken from the sulfuric, infernal, subconscious zone where you stuffed it potentially when you were a kid and you forgot about it. It happens to a lot of us. I hope you'll try BetterHelp. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Duncan to get 10%. Visit BetterHelp.com/Duncan to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Duncan to get 10% off your first month. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Duncan to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Duncan to get 10% off. BetterHelp, HELP. Thank you, BetterHelp.
Or this book, sells more copies than my previous book, whatever it is,
Right.
Sky like mind, right? We're in a much bigger context of non-solidity. And I think anytime we go to a larger context, we are touching in with the empty aspect. And that will make whatever relative truth work we need to do on our personal selves more available and a little more lighthearted too.
Right. Yeah, right. Yes. You won't take, yes, taking yourself too seriously is, the road to insecurity, and also is a mistake. But then also not taking yourself seriously. You should. You are important. You are, especially if you're human in the Buddhist cosmological cosmology. Being human is an incredible thing. Just to end up human shows that you've done something great. And so, what are your recommendations for people who are habitually insecure? What's just some practical methods? Like, and let me give you like an example. And I feel like I've gotten much better at this. But like when I was just starting comedy, or when I was just started headlining, I would be paralyzed with fear in my hotel room bed the whole day before the show. I didn't want to think. I was so scared because I felt so insecure about being a comedian. And it's gotten much better now, but to the point where like now, like I'm generally excited to perform, but every once in a while, the specter of insecurity rears its head. Quite often, the moments before I walk on stage. This has happened a couple of times where, everything's fine except for like 3 minutes before I go on stage. Some part of my mind spits out, what if you bomb? These people got babysitters. Don't fuck this up. And if I'm not careful, that can ripple into my act. Like I don't want to go on stage with the energy of Lucifer, like in that sense. So in a real world way, what are some methods to deal with that?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot in confidence. There's a lot of different meditation and contemplative exercises in most of the chapters, but I think the ground of all this is we have to acknowledge our basic goodness, that like we are fundamentally okay. Yeah. And on that basis, that's how we take our seat, to say like I can show up. And a lot of times I think people, when they meditate, they come from a basic badness or an original sin perspective. Like, yes, I need to do this to fix me, or I need to like, mindfulness must be about like putting little bad me back in the box so it doesn't get out, Yeah. And we need to start with like, I'm actually going to experience that I am okay, And then I think really calling on the experiences where we've had strength and we figured out the situation that we're in before, Right. I talked in the book about first time I read my poetry. I was at the Bowery Poetry Club in New York. I was like 23. It wasn't the first time I read my poetry, but in front of a large group of people. It was a poetry performance series, spoken word, as we used to call it in the early aughties. Yeah. And I remember. A music performance series that my friend organized, and there were like 200 people there. And I was like, I'm going to be okay, right? And then I got up on stage and my legs were shaking uncontrollably, Yeah. And there was nothing I could do about it because I couldn't have my like logical brain talk to my legs. It wasn't like my logical brain, my prefrontal cortex was not in charge of my legs, and there was no philosophy of emptiness that was there either. So I just was willing to bomb, but it was okay. Like the words were okay. My friend who organized the thing was very loving and supportive, but he also laughed at me, Yeah. And both of those were okay, Right. It wasn't. So I do really think we need to surround ourselves with supportive people first. And I think that's the function of Sangha or community, is like friends who actually remind you of your basic goodness. And start there, and then really start by contemplating your strengths. When you have that moment where you're about to go on stage and like, maybe I'm going to bomb, what I would recommend for you is to grow more familiar with the fact that this is just what happens to me every single time I go on stage, right? So it's like, oh, hello, and if you have a name for that inner critic, like, Lucy, Sharon Salzberg's example, or then in 3 minutes before you go on stage, you can be like, oh, hello, whoever the critic is.
Hello, Satan.
Hello,
I
Lucifer.
thought I sold my soul to you for success. Why are you making me scared?
Yeah, and it would be from a Buddhist perspective. It would be like, all right, Satan, all right, Lucifer, I guess you're coming on stage with me. You know?
Yeah. How about you
doing
perform,
this together.
motherfucker? Now you're going up. I'm not even going to be there. Yeah, you do the jokes.
He can just come with you, you know?
I love that. No, I think like what you're reminding me of something. And it's an incredibly obvious thing that seems like the most simple thing, easiest thing to forget, which is ultimately you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
Because you already are fine.
You're already
the only
fine.
way you're going to be fine is if you already are fine.
Right. In those moments that I've had when I have kept up a regular meditation practice, where you're just walking around and you're fine. But, if you're neurotic, that event feels spectacularly alien, where you're like, my God, I feel absolutely fine. The world is great. I feel good. Everything's fine. Not because something great happened, but just because. Like, if I could connect to that place on the regs, oh my God, that to me would be like true confidence. True, the actual real thing, not the con man style confidence that it seems like many people have confused with confidence.
Yeah, well, that's the false confidence, right? That's also why I wanted to talk about this book, because I do think we live in this era of false confidence. Especially I think to a certain degree, false male confidence in a lot of times. And that's interesting. The word con man actually is short for confidence man, right?
Yes.
So that's an interesting kind of bizarro flip on the notion of what is true loving confidence, right?
Oh my God, people like once you get good at faking confidence, if you can fake confidence, so many people just are. The more insecure you are, the more attractive confidence is probably going to seem to you. Like, oh my God, this person feels okay in the world, and they must know what they're doing. And that's how you get your watch stolen. That's how you die in the woods. God help you if you're with someone who's faking being good at hiking or finding, like, reading a map or something. I mean, this is, and I think, this is like what is happening. If you wanted to do some dummy analysis of why there's problems in everywhere, is that politicians recognize, like, they don't really have to know. The most important thing to know is how to seem confident. You know what I mean? The more confident you seem, even if you're saying a lie, the more people will believe it. And so, yeah, that's good. It's so creepy how probably most people, whatever they think of as confidence is just something they've picked up from con artists who seem confident, but inside or recognize they're total frauds.
Yeah, and so I think genuine confidence comes with curiosity, it comes with transparency, it comes with vulnerability. So whenever I write about these highfalutin Buddhist concepts, I always like to, talk about my own struggles a little bit, hopefully not to be, overly performative, but to kind of show that this is the struggle we're all in. And,
right.
Anybody who claims, I do think there are some more awakened people in the world. I'm not saying that, but I think most of them have grown more transparent, more gentle, more open about who they are and about having thoughts and feelings that aren't necessarily I got this, I got it all figured out, but are like, oh, I don't know, let's see. I think sometimes the most confident person actually says, no, I know this. I have some relevant experience and expertise. Like I can figure this out, and if you have like a plumber or a doctor, you kind of want that person, right? Who knows things you don't know.
Yeah.
But with somebody who's more a psychological or spiritual voice or working with the heart and mind, you want somebody, I want somebody who's like, here are some of the principles and practices we can do. Here's been my experience with those, and here's how I've met my struggles, and my struggles are not different from yours,
Right.
We're human. This is what it means to be human.
Right. Yeah, right. Don't fall for someone who's like, is conveying they got it all worked out. right? You don't want that. That's usually a bad sign. I would love to meet that person though, because it's either you've met like Jesus or you've met like a sociopath. Either way, very interesting.
Yeah. But even when you have somebody who has it all worked out spiritually or psychologically, they're usually like, well, here's a principle that you might want to look at. Here's how it works for me. You know, they're looking at things from multiple angles. They're not projecting their experience onto yours. They don't have that much to get from you, you know, if they really have it all worked out. They just want you to find your path, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, I get that vibe from you, man. I think you're doing great work with this, with this book. I'm confident that it's going to do great because not just for because of the topic, but because your writing is so good. I mean, I think people listening, that's what's I think is so wonderful. It's, you know, there's some books that just like are page turners, you know, and that's my favorite kind. Just the sort of writing that like is just the right amount of sweet, but also has built into it. Well, especially when it comes to Buddhism, like pretty hardcore ideas that can show up in Buddhism that if there isn't skillful means, so to speak, they can really freak people out, spin people, or just make people go, fuck this. I don't want to read about this. Emptiness? No, I'm not. I'm a me. I have 40,000 followers. Obviously, I'm real. But this book is the opposite of that to me. It's beautiful, well written, and I can't wait to finish it. I wish I'd gotten it sooner. I would have finished it. I need it.
Well, thank you for that praise. That positive wind is hitting me, and you know, I'll try not to lose my seat with it. And to give you a little bit of praise, I was just on an online half-day retreat with people who've been practicing with Dharma Moon for a while, and mentioned we were talking about the Tibetan teachings on the bardos, the cycle of life and death, because we were using Pema Chodron's latest book, How We Live is How We Die, and I mentioned Midnight Gospel. And specifically, you know, as we were talking about life and death and rebirth, the episode of You and Your Mother, and I encourage everybody to watch that in terms of this life and death. And one of the students said, there's a direct line for me between watching Midnight Gospel and going deep into the Buddhist teachings with Dharma Moon.
Wow.
So,
Cool.
So I think you're positively affecting a lot of people, and I hope there's like another Midnight Gospel style project in the works. Because
I would love to. One day there will be. I mean, yeah. Thank you for telling me that. Thank you. I am in the wind of your positivity. More, please. Keep blowing that wind.
Okay.
You can't do that.
You're a great dad.
But you know what? That's the other funny thing about it. You can never say, "Can you give me more praise?" You're not allowed to. Like you get one praise unit. That's it. You can't be like, "Please dispense more praise." Man, again, folks. When this comes out next week, or did it just come out? This is next.
This comes out on May 21st.
That's 2 days. Yeah, great. So by the time you hear this podcast, this book is already going to be out. Please get it. Confidence. Also, he's written many other books, and if somehow you didn't recognize, this is David from the Midnight Gospel's kid. So he must be super proud of you.
He's my Jewish half, and he's a very Jewish father. He's my hype man for sure.
All right, great, yeah.
I don't look to him for criticism because he's not reliable that way. I look to other people for healthy criticism. He just tells me I'm doing great and keep going. So
lucky you.
I know, but it's a little over the top sometimes. It has problems.
I think you deserve it. This book is fantastic. I hope you guys order this thing. Confidence, holding your seat through life's 8 worldly winds. Ethan, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
Thank you, Duncan. A pleasure.